Katie Morrison sat in the Grand Council chamber and watched the alien delegates argue with each other. The huge room was filled with beings from across the galaxy, each one more worried than the last. Blue-skinned Altarians waved their forearms in panic, while the tall hegemony leaders clicked their mandibles in fear. The air itself seemed thick with desperation, and everyone knew why. The Zephyrian Empire was winning the war, and no one could stop them. Katie looked down at her tablet and read the latest reports from the outer colonies. 3 more star systems had fallen in just 2 weeks. The Kepler station was nothing but floating metal now. Over 50 million beings had died when the Zephyrians attacked the mining worlds near Vega Prime. Their biomechanical ships moved like living things through space, and their weapons could turn entire planets into glass. Commander Jake Sullivan leaned over to Katie and whispered in her ear. His face was grim as he showed her the newest intelligence report. The Zephyrian fleet had grown to over 2,000 ships. Each vessel was massive, some as big as small moons. They had energy shields that could stop any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. Their hulls were made of some kind of living metal that could repair itself. Most terrifying of all, they never showed mercy to civilians. The council leader stood up, at the center of the room. Vexstar was an old Altarian, with silver skin and tired eyes. He had led the Galactic Council for 30 years, but Katie had never seen him look so defeated. His voice carried across the chamber as he spoke to the hundreds of delegates. "My friends, we face the end of everything we have built together," he said slowly. "The Zephyrian Empire has destroyed the hegemony fleet. The proud warriors of Drakmor are now refugees, fleeing their burning worlds. The Crystalline Collective has gone silent, and we fear the worst. In 6 months of fighting, we have not won a single major battle." A delegate from the Outer Rim colonies stood up, and his voice shook with anger. "Where are our defenders? Where are the great fleets that promised to protect us? My people are dying while we sit here and talk." Vexstar nodded sadly. The combined fleets of 12 species attacked the Zephyrians at Ross 128. Only 3 ships returned, and they could barely fly. The enemy's weapons are beyond anything we understand. Their shields can stop our plasma cannons, our photon torpedoes, even our quantum disruptors. We have thrown everything we have at them, and nothing works. Katie looked around the chamber and saw fear in every face. The Drakmor warriors were 7 feet tall, with natural armor, but even they looked scared. The peaceful flower people were weeping with their petal-like faces, while the mechanical synthetics calculated endless defeat scenarios with their computer minds. Every species in the galaxy was represented here, and they all knew the same terrible truth. The Zephyrians could not be stopped by conventional means. A young hegemony officer stepped forward with new data. "The enemy fleet is moving toward the core worlds. Intelligence suggests they will attack the Centauri system within 2 months. After that, they will have a clear path to Earth, Altair Prime, and even this world." The chamber erupted in panic. Beings shouted in dozens of languages while others simply stared in shock. Katie watched it all and felt a cold feeling in her stomach. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 20 years. They were still considered newcomers by most species. But now, with nowhere else to turn, all eyes were looking at the small human delegation. Vexstar raised his hand for silence, and the chamber gradually became quiet. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "We have one last hope. There is one species that has not yet committed their full military strength to this war." He looked directly at Katie, and she felt the weight of 1,000 stares. Every being in the chamber was looking at her now. Some looked hopeful, while others seemed doubtful. Humanity had never fought a major space war before. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. Their ships were smaller, and their weapons were based on old concepts that most species had abandoned centuries ago. "Admiral Morrison," Vexstar said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council and all free peoples of this galaxy, We ask for humanity's help. We know your people are still new to space warfare. We know your fleet is small compared to what we have already lost. But you are our last hope." Katie stood up slowly and felt the attention of the entire galaxy focused on her. She thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had no idea that alien empires were fighting for control of the stars. She thought about her own family back home and about the colonies that humanity had worked so hard to build. Jake leaned over and whispered urgently in her ear, "The President authorized you to make this decision. Earth's Defense Council is ready to mobilize everything we have." Katie looked around the chamber one more time. She saw desperate faces from 100 different worlds. She saw species that had lived in peace for thousands of years, now facing extinction. She saw the end of galactic civilization, unless someone could stop the Zephyrian war machine. But she also saw something else. She saw hope in their eyes when they looked at humanity. They believed that humans might have something different, something that could change the course of this war. Maybe it was because humans were new to the galaxy and had not been corrupted by centuries of peaceful coexistence. Maybe it was because human history was filled with stories of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Or maybe they were just desperate enough to try anything. Katie took a deep breath and spoke, in a clear voice that carried to every corner of the chamber. "The United Earth government accepts this responsibility. Humanity will stand with the Galactic Council against the Zephyrian Empire. We will commit our full military strength to this war. We will fight until victory is achieved, or until we can fight no more." The chamber exploded in cheers from dozens of different species, but Katie barely heard them. She was already thinking about what came next. Earth would have to mobilize its hidden war fleets. The colonies would have to prepare for battle, and somewhere out in the dark space between the stars, the Zephyrian Empire was coming. President Alex Carter sat in the emergency meeting room deep beneath the White House and stared at the holographic display of the galaxy. Red markers showed where the Zephyrian Empire had attacked, while blue dots marked the locations of human colonies. The red was spreading fast and would reach human space within weeks. General Lisa Hayes stood at the head of the table and pointed to the tactical display. She had fought in 3 colonial wars, and her face showed the strain of command. "Mr. President, the situation is worse than we initially thought. The Zephyrian bioships are not just advanced technology. They appear to be partially alive. Our intelligence suggests they can adapt to enemy weapons in real time." Alex rubbed his tired eyes and looked around the table at Earth's military leaders. "What do our allies have to say about Zephyrian capabilities?" "The Altarians provided us with battle recordings from their last engagement," Lisa replied. "The enemy ships are massive, some over 5 kilometers long. They have energy shields that can absorb directed energy weapons without any apparent limit. Plasma cannons, laser batteries, photon torpedoes, all of them are useless against Zephyrian defenses." Dr. Ryan Brooks cleared his throat and opened his tablet. The head of the Terran Research Institute was a thin man with nervous hands, but his mind was brilliant. "Mr. President, I believe I have found their weakness. While other species developed energy-based warfare over thousands of years, they forgot about something much simpler: kinetic weapons." Alex leaned forward with interest. "Explain." Ryan activated his hologram and showed a Zephyrian ship being hit by different weapons. Energy shields work by dispersing heat and electromagnetic radiation, but they cannot stop physical objects moving at high velocity. A simple metal projectile moving fast enough will punch right through their defenses. General Hayes looked skeptical. "Doctor, kinetic weapons were abandoned by most species centuries ago. They are considered primitive." "Exactly," Ryan said with excitement in his voice. "The Zephyrians have never faced kinetic warfare on a large scale. Their shields are not designed to stop railgun projectiles or guided missiles. While they were perfecting their defenses against energy weapons, we were perfecting the art of throwing very heavy objects very fast." Alex stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the Pentagon. How quickly can we mobilize our fleets? Captain Steve Parker spoke up from his position near the communications console. Sir, Operation Hidden Fleet can be activated within 72 hours. We have been preparing for this possibility for the last 5 years. Alex turned around with surprise. Hidden Fleet. Steve nodded and activated a new display. After the Drakmore border incident, Earth Defense Command decided to prepare for large-scale space warfare. We have been building and positioning ships throughout human space under the cover of civilian operations. The hologram showed dozens of ships scattered across human colonies. What looked like simple mining vessels and cargo haulers suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems and armor plating. Asteroid bases opened to show massive shipyards. Even the lunar surface displayed hidden launch platforms. The UES Liberty, UES Freedom, and US Justice are our primary battle cruisers, Steve continued. Each one carries enough kinetic weapons to destroy a small fleet. We also have 47 destroyers, over 200 fighter craft, and support vessels throughout the system. Admiral Ben Taylor stood up from his position at the far end of the table. Mr. President, Mars shipyards can begin producing ammunition immediately. Our industrial capacity has been quietly converted to military production over the past 2 years. We can manufacture railgun projectiles, guided missiles, and armor-piercing rounds at a rate that will surprise our enemies. Lisa Hayes pulled up another display showing Earth's orbital defenses. The lunar defense platforms are already operational. Each platform contains 16 railgun batteries and enough ammunition for extended combat. Our sensor networks can track enemy movements from 3 light-years away. Alex felt a surge of pride in his chest. Earth had been planning for this day even when the rest of the galaxy lived in peace. What about our colonies? Every human settlement has been fortified, Ben replied. Civilian freighters carry hidden torpedo tubes. Mining stations have been equipped with defensive weapons. Even our agricultural colonies have orbital minefields and surface space missile batteries. Dr. Brooks opened a new file on his tablet. Sir, I have been working with our alien allies to understand Zephyrian tactics. They rely on overwhelming firepower and their energy shields to win battles quickly. They have never faced an enemy that uses swarm tactics with kinetic weapons. Alex looked around the room at his military leaders. These men and women had been preparing for war while the galaxy enjoyed peace. They had built fleets in secret and developed weapons that could punch through the most advanced defenses in known space. General Hayes, how long until our forces are ready for combat? Lisa checked her datapad and looked up with determination. All fleet elements will be in position within 48 hours. Mars shipyards are already producing ammunition around the clock. The lunar platforms are fully operational and our sensor networks are tracking enemy movements in real time. Steve Parker received a message on his console and looked up with excitement. Sir, we are receiving confirmation from all colonial defense forces. New Terra reports their defensive systems are operational. The Titan mining stations are ready for combat. Even the Outer Rim agricultural worlds have activated their hidden weapons. Alex felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. Earth was about to commit its entire military strength to a galactic war. Millions of human lives would depend on the decisions made in this room. But looking at the determined faces around the table, he knew they were ready. Gentlemen, ladies, give the order. Activate Operation Hidden Fleet. Mobilize all colonial defenses. Contact Admiral Morrison and tell her that Earth stands ready to fight. As the military leaders rushed to carry out their orders, Alex remained at the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien empires were fighting for survival. The Zephyrian war machine was advancing toward human space with weapons that could destroy entire worlds. But Earth was not the peaceful farming world it had been 20 years ago. Humanity had been preparing for this moment. They had ships that could move like ghosts between the stars. They had weapons that could punch holes through the strongest defenses. Most importantly, they had something the galaxy had forgotten about after centuries of peace. They remembered how to fight a real war. Commander Nicole Davis guided her reconnaissance squadron through the outer edge of the Sigma Draconis system, and felt her blood turn cold at what she saw on the long-range sensors. The Zephyrian Empire had turned the fourth planet into a massive military base. Biomechanical constructs the size of cities floated in orbit, while smaller vessels moved between them like insects around a hive. "Holy Mother of God," whispered Lieutenant Tom Anderson from the sensor station. "Ma'am, I count over 300 enemy vessels in the immediate area. Some of those things are 15 kilometers long." Nicole studied the tactical display and tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The Zephyrian ships did not look like anything built by civilized species. They were organic in appearance, with curved hulls that pulsed with internal light. Energy discharges moved across their surfaces like lightning, while weapon ports opened and closed like breathing mouths. "Send a coded burst transmission to Admiral Martinez," she ordered. "Tell him we have found the enemy forward base. Also tell him to bring more ships, because we are going to need them." Her small task force consisted of 5 human destroyers that had been disguised as mining equipment until 3 days ago. They were fast and heavily armed, but they looked like toys compared to the massive bioships ahead of them. The largest Zephyrian vessel was longer than Manhattan Island, and bristled with weapon systems that could probably crack planets. Admiral Chris Martinez received the transmission aboard the UES Liberty and immediately called an emergency meeting of his senior officers. The main war room of the battlecruiser was filled with holographic displays showing the enemy positions. Every face around the table looked grim as they studied the tactical situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at the largest concentration of enemy forces ever recorded," Chris said to his staff. "A direct assault against this base would be suicide, even with our kinetic weapons. We need a different approach." Captain Joe Richardson leaned back in his chair and studied the enemy formations. He had commanded destroyers in the border wars, and understood space combat better than most officers. "Sir, those bioships are powerful, but they move slowly. If we use hit-and-run tactics, we might be able to damage their supply lines without engaging their main battle fleet." Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster opened her tablet and displayed human military history. "Admiral, I have been studying ancient Earth warfare. The tactics that work best against superior enemies are harassment, mobility, and attacking weak points. We should fight like wolves against lions." Chris nodded and pointed to the tactical display. "The Zephyrians have established supply convoys moving between their base and the outer system. If we can disrupt their logistics, we might force them to spread their forces thin." Nicole's voice came through the communication system from her position on the system's edge. "Admiral, I am tracking a supply convoy heading toward the asteroid belt. 12 vessels with minimal escort. This could be our chance to test their defenses." Chris looked around the table at his officers. Earth's entire strategy depended on kinetic weapons being effective against Zephyrian shields. If their rail and missiles could not penetrate enemy defenses, the war would be lost before it truly began. "All right, people, this is it. Captain Richardson, take your destroyer squadron and support Commander Davis. Use kinetic torpedoes and railgun salvos. Hit them hard and fast, then get out before their main fleet can respond." Joe nodded and headed for his ship. Within an hour, 8 human destroyers were moving through the asteroid belt toward the enemy convoy. Their hulls were painted black, and their engines ran silent to avoid detection. Each ship carried enough kinetic weapons to destroy a small city. The Zephyrian supply convoy moved slowly through space like a line of massive whales. The bioships pulsed with internal light, while their organic hulls rippled with movement. Energy shields shimmered around each vessel like heat waves, while smaller escort ships darted around the formation. All ships. This is Richardson Joe's voice came through the communication channel. Targets designated. Fire on my mark. Remember, we hit hard and we get out fast. The human destroyers emerged from behind a large asteroid and immediately opened fire. Railgun projectiles moving at tremendous velocity slammed into the lead Zephyrian vessel. The kinetic rounds punched clean through the energy shields and tore massive holes in the biomechanical hull. Secondary explosions rippled along the alien ship's spine as internal systems failed. Kinetic torpedoes followed the railgun barrage and struck 2 more supply ships. The guided missiles used simple chemical explosives, but their high velocity gave them devastating impact power. One Zephyrian vessel broke apart completely, while another began leaking atmosphere and organic fluids into space. Direct hits on 3 targets, reported Lieutenant Sarah Collins from her destroyer. Enemy shields are not effective against kinetic weapons. Repeat, kinetic weapons are penetrating their defenses. But the Zephyrian response was swift and terrible. The escort ships immediately turned toward the human vessels and opened fire with energy weapons that could vaporize asteroids. Beams of coherent light reached across space and struck 2 human destroyers. One ship disappeared completely, while the other lost its entire forward section. All ships retreat, Joe ordered, as more enemy vessels emerged from behind the supply convoy. We have the information we need. Fall back to Rally Point Alpha. The surviving human destroyers scattered in different directions and used the asteroid field to break up enemy targeting solutions. The Zephyrian pursuit ships were faster than anything in space, but the humans knew how to use 3-dimensional terrain to their advantage. They dove under asteroids, wove between debris fields, and used sensor shadows to stay 1 step ahead of their enemies. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster monitored the battle from the command ship and immediately began analyzing the results. The kinetic weapons had worked exactly as predicted. Human railguns and missiles could punch through Zephyrian shields and damage their biomechanical hulls. But the enemy's energy weapons were devastating and their pursuit ships were incredibly fast. Word of the successful attack spread throughout the human fleet within hours. Admiral Chris Martinez transmitted the battle results to Earth while also sending the data to Allied forces throughout the galaxy. For the first time since the war began, someone had hurt the Zephyrian Empire, but the victory came at a terrible cost. 2 destroyers had been lost, along with over 400 crew members. The enemy was already adapting to human tactics, and their next response would be even more deadly. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Martinez studied the long-range sensors and watched Zephyrian reinforcements moving toward human space. The bioships were massing for a major assault, and their target was obvious. They were coming for Earth itself. The first battle had been won, but the real war was just beginning. Humanity had proven that the Zephyrians could be hurt, but now the enemy knew about human capabilities. The next engagement would test everything. Earth had learned about fighting superior aliens with inferior technology. Nicole Davis brought her battered reconnaissance squadron back to the human fleet and immediately began preparing for the next mission. The galaxy was watching and waiting to see if humanity could really stand against the Zephyrian war machine. She intended to make sure they got their answer. Fleet Admiral Dan Murphy stood on the bridge of the UES Justice and watched the Zephyrian armada approaching New Terra through the view screen. Over 800 biomechanical ships moved through space like a living storm. Their hulls pulsed with malevolent energy, while weapons that could destroy continents charged for firing. The largest vessel in the enemy formation was 20 kilometers long and looked like some ancient sea monster adapted for space warfare. "Sir, we have confirmation from Earth Defense Command," reported Communications Officer Janet Stone. "The Centauri colonies are under attack. The enemy has split their forces and is hitting human settlements across 3 star systems simultaneously." Dan felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on his shoulders. Earth's war fleet was powerful, but it could not be everywhere at once. If he concentrated his forces to defend New Terra, the other colonies would be destroyed. If he spread his ships too thin, he would lose everything, including the agricultural world that fed half of human space. Captain Michelle Thompson's voice crackled through the communication system from the orbital defense platforms around New Terra. Admiral, enemy bioships are entering the atmosphere. I count 40 vessels beginning bombardment runs on the main continent. Our surface orbit missiles are engaging, but we need fleet support. Dan looked at his tactical display and saw the terrible truth. New Terra had 2 million colonists who depended on him for protection, but the Proxima station was also under attack, and those 300,000 miners were fighting for their lives against overwhelming odds. At Wolf 359, the research colonies were sending desperate pleas for help as Zephyrian ships turned their laboratories into burning wreckage. All ships, this is Admiral Murphy, he announced to the fleet. We are going to defend New Terra with everything we have. Captain Martinez, take your battle group and reinforce Proxima Station. Admiral Brown, I need you to coordinate the Wolf 359 defense. We are not going to abandon any human settlement. Kevin Brown acknowledged the orders from his position aboard the UES Freedom. His task force consisted of 12 destroyers and 4 battle cruisers. It was not enough to stop the Zephyrian attack on Wolf 359. But he would make the aliens pay dearly for every human life they took on New Terra. Captain Michelle commanded the desperate defense from the underground command center. The planet's defense grid consisted of missile batteries, railgun platforms, and orbital mines that had been hidden in the asteroid belt. Every weapon humanity had developed for kinetic warfare was being tested against the most advanced alien technology in the galaxy. Launch all surface-to-orbit missiles, Michelle ordered, as Zephyrian bioships descended through the atmosphere. Target their engine sections and weapon pods. Do not let them reach the cities. Hundreds of missiles streaked up from hidden launch sites across the planet's surface. The kinetic warheads struck the descending bioships and punched holes in their organic hulls. Several alien vessels crashed into the ocean, while others spun out of control and impacted in uninhabited areas. But more ships kept coming, and their energy weapons were turning farmland into glass. Admiral Kevin Brown arrived at Wolf 359 to find the research stations already burning. The Zephyrian attack had been swift and merciless. 3 orbital laboratories had been destroyed completely while the main research facility was being boarded by alien ground troops. But Lieutenant Sarah Bailey had managed to transmit crucial intelligence before her communications were cut off. Admiral, I managed to analyze the enemy command structure during their assault. Sarah's recorded message played on Kevin's bridge. The Zephyrian bioships are not independent vessels. They are connected through some kind of neural network. The largest ship in each fleet acts as a coordination hub. If we can disable that command vessel, their entire formation becomes confused and vulnerable. Kevin studied the enemy formation through his tactical display. The Zephyrian command ship was a massive biomechanical construct that pulsed with neural energy. Smaller vessels moved around it in perfect coordination, like fingers controlled by a single brain. If Sarah's analysis was correct, destroying that one ship could turn the tide of battle. All ships, target the enemy command vessel, Kevin ordered. Concentrate all railgun fire on the largest bioship. Use armor-piercing rounds, and aim for the neural connection pods. The human battle group opened fire with everything they had. Railgun projectiles moving at incredible velocities slammed into the command ship's hull. Kinetic torpedoes followed the barrage and detonated inside the alien vessel's neural processing centers. The massive bioship convulsed like a wounded animal as its coordination systems failed. Immediately, the other Zephyrian vessels began moving erratically. Some ships fired on their own allies, while others simply stopped dead in space. The perfect coordination that made the alien fleet so dangerous had been broken by targeting a single critical weakness. Marine Colonel Greg Johnson led the boarding action that finished the job. His assault teams used shaped charges to blast through the disabled command ship's hull, fighting their way through corridors that seemed more like living tissue than metal passages. The Marines reached the vessel's neural core and planted nuclear devices that would prevent any possibility of the system being repaired. Back at New Terra, Captain Michelle received reports of the victory at Wolf 359 and immediately applied the same tactics. Her orbital platforms concentrated their fire on the largest Saphirian bioship in the attacking fleet. When the command vessel was destroyed, the remaining alien ships began attacking each other in confusion. Admiral Patricia White coordinated the counterattack from her position aboard the UES Liberty. With the enemy formations disrupted, human forces launched simultaneous strikes against isolated Zephyrian groups throughout the system. The aliens had superior technology, but without central coordination they were vulnerable to human swarm tactics. The battle for the Centauri colonies became the turning point of the entire war. Human forces proved that the mighty Zephyrian Empire could be defeated through intelligence, coordination, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. Word of the victories spread throughout the galaxy faster than light itself. Allied species that had been hiding in fear began to emerge from their defensive positions. The Altarian Republic mobilized its reserve fleets. The proud warriors of Drakmor began planning their return to their conquered homeworlds. Even the peaceful flower people contributed their advanced sensor technology to the war effort. Admiral Dan Murphy received confirmation that all 3 colonies had been saved. The cost had been terrible, with over 50 ships lost and thousands of human casualties. But for the first time since the war began, the Zephyrian Empire had been forced to retreat from human space. The liberation of the Altarian homeworld came 3 weeks later. Combined human and alien forces worked together, using tactics developed during the Centauri campaign. Human kinetic weapons punched through Zephyrian defenses, while Allied ships provided electronic warfare support and sensor coordination. As the blue and white flag of the Altarian Republic was raised over their capital city, once again, Admiral Katie Morrison stood with Council Leader Vexstar and watched the celebration. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the cost of freedom and the power of species working together against tyranny. But even as they celebrated, long-range sensors detected massive Zephyrian reinforcements moving in from the dark space beyond the galaxy's rim. The enemy had one final weapon that could destroy everything humanity had fought to protect. The real test of human resolve was still to come. Admiral Tony Garcia stared at the massive structure emerging from the dark space beyond the galaxy and felt fear like he had never known before. The Zephyrian planet killer was 40 kilometers long and shaped like some ancient nightmare from the deepest ocean. Its biomechanical hull pulsed with malevolent energy, while weapons that could crack worlds charged along its spine. This was the enemy's final gambit, their ultimate weapon designed to destroy entire civilizations. "Sir, we are receiving emergency transmissions from Nexus Prime," reported Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park from the communications station. "The Galactic Council is evacuating, but they estimate only 12 hours before the planet killer reaches firing position. Once that weapon charges, it can destroy the entire system." Tony looked around the bridge of the UES Defiance at the faces of his crew. These men and women had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. The combined fleets of Earth and her allies had assembled near Nexus Prime, but their conventional weapons were useless against the massive bioconstruct approaching them. Dr. Emma Clark worked frantically in the science lab with alien researchers from 6 different species. The quantum physicist had been studying Zephyrian biotechnology for weeks, trying to find any weakness in their ultimate weapon. Her face was exhausted, but her eyes still held determination. "Admiral, I think we found something," Emma announced. Over the ship's communication system. "The planet killer's organic components require a specific frequency of neural coordination to function. If we can disrupt that frequency with concentrated electromagnetic radiation, The biomechanical systems might tear themselves apart. Tony activated the holographic display and studied the massive weapon bearing down on them. "Doctor, what kind of electromagnetic pulse would we need to generate?" "The energy requirements are enormous," Emma replied. "We would need to detonate a modified fusion warhead inside the creature's neural core. The electromagnetic radiation from the explosion should disrupt the biomechanical systems throughout the entire structure." Captain Matt Wilson stepped forward from his position near the tactical station. The young pilot had volunteered to fly the modified bomber that would carry the special warhead into the heart of the planet killer. His face was calm, but Tony could see the fear in his eyes. "Sir, my ship is ready for the mission," Matt reported. "We have stripped out all non-essential systems and loaded the biggest fusion warhead the engineering teams could build. The electromagnetic pulse should disable their weapon systems long enough for the fleet to escape." Tony knew what the young captain was really saying. The modified bomber would have to penetrate deep into the planet killer's hull to reach the neural core. Even if the mission succeeded, Matt and his crew would not survive the electromagnetic pulse generated by their own weapon squadron. Leader Rachel Davis brought her fighter squadron into formation around Matt's bomber. Her pilots had volunteered to provide escort through the bioconstruct's defensive systems. Every one of them knew they were flying into certain death, but none had hesitated when asked to volunteer. "All fighters, this is Davis," Rachel announced over the squadron frequency. "Our job is to get Captain Wilson to his target. We clear the way in, and we make sure he reaches the neural core. Everything else is secondary to completing this mission." The planet killer continued its approach toward Nexus Prime, while the combined Allied fleet moved to intercept. Human battlecruisers led the formation with their kinetic weapons ready, while alien ships provided electronic warfare support and sensor coordination. But everyone knew that conventional weapons could not stop the massive bio-construct. Admiral Katie Morrison coordinated the fleet action from her position aboard the command ship. The former Council representative had been promoted to Supreme Allied Commander after her success in uniting the galaxy's military forces. Now she faced the greatest test of her career as the enemy's ultimate weapon, prepared to destroy everything she had fought to protect. "All ships, begin the assault," Katie ordered. "Target their weapon pods and engine sections. We need to buy Captain Wilson time to reach the neural core." The combined fleet opened fire with every weapon they possessed. Railgun projectiles, plasma cannons, photon torpedoes, and quantum disruptors struck the planet killer's hull without causing significant damage. The biomechanical construct was simply too large and too heavily armored for conventional weapons to penetrate. But the attack served its purpose by drawing the attention of the planet killer's defensive systems. Smaller bioships emerged from launch bays along the massive vessel's hull, while energy weapons began targeting the Allied fleet. The space around Nexus Prime became a battlefield, as hundreds of ships engaged in desperate combat. Matt Wilson piloted his modified bomber through the chaos toward the planet killer's hull. His small craft was built for speed rather than combat, and could barely avoid the energy beams reaching out to destroy him. Fighter escorts from 6 different species provided cover while he searched for an entry point into the bioconstruct's interior. "I have found a maintenance port near the creature's forward section," Matt reported. "Beginning penetration, run now." All escort fighters maintain cover formation. Rachel Davis led her squadron in a desperate attack on the bioships defending the maintenance port. Human fighters dove through walls of energy fire while alien pilots used their advanced maneuvering systems to confuse enemy targeting computers. Several craft were destroyed in the first few seconds, but they succeeded in clearing a path for the bomber. Inside the planet killer, Matt found himself flying through corridors that seemed more like living arteries than spacecraft passages. The walls pulsed with organic rhythm, while neural pathways carried information throughout the massive structure. Navigation was nearly impossible, but Emma's sensor modifications allowed him to track the electromagnetic signatures leading to the neural core. I am approaching the target area, Matt transmitted. The neural core is heavily defended, but I can see the central processing cluster. Beginning final approach now. The planet killer's internal defenses activated as the human bomber approached its most vital systems. Biomechanical constructs that looked like flying antibodies swarmed toward the intruding craft, while energy barriers tried to block access to the neural core. Matt used his pilot skills to weave between the defenses while his modified weapons cleared the path ahead. Outside the bioconstruct, the Allied fleet continued its desperate holding action. Ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced, but Katie refused to order a retreat. Every second they could buy for Matt Wilson might mean the difference between victory and the destruction of galactic civilization. The planet killer's main weapon began charging for its attack on Nexus Prime. Energy discharges larger. Then continents danced along the bioconstruct's spine while targeting. Systems locked onto the Council world below. In less than 10 minutes, the weapon would fire, and nothing would remain of the Galactic Council except radioactive debris. Matt reached the neural core and immediately armed his modified fusion warhead. The device would generate an electromagnetic pulse powerful enough to disrupt every biomechanical system in the planet killer. But the explosion would also destroy his ship and kill everyone aboard within seconds. Mission accomplished, Matt transmitted to the fleet. Tell my family I did my duty. Tell them the galaxy is safe. The fusion warhead detonated inside the planet neural core and sent electromagnetic radiation cascading throughout the massive bioconstruct. The neural pathways that controlled the creature's weapon systems began failing as the pulse disrupted every organic circuit in the structure. Secondary explosions rippled along the biomechanical spine, while the main weapon's charging sequence collapsed completely. The planet killer convulsed like a dying dead animal as its internal systems tore themselves apart. The biomechanical hull cracked open in dozens of places, while atmosphere and organic fluids leaked into space. What had been the most terrifying weapon in galactic history became a floating tomb, drifting helplessly through the void. Admiral Tony Garcia watched the massive structure break apart and felt tears running down his face. Captain Matt Wilson had saved the galaxy, but the cost of victory would haunt everyone who survived this day. The young pilot's sacrifice would be remembered as long as humans traveled between the stars. The remaining Zephyrian fleet immediately began retreating toward the dark space beyond the galaxy's rim. Without their ultimate weapon, the bioships were vulnerable to the combined Allied forces that had learned to fight as one unified military. The empire that had terrorized countless worlds was finally broken and would never again threaten galactic civilization. Katie Morrison stood in the council chamber 3 months later and looked out at the representatives of 47 different species. The Galactic Council had been rebuilt stronger than before, with new defense protocols based on human military doctrine. Every species had contributed ships and personnel to the new Allied defense force that would patrol the galaxy's borders. Today we celebrate not just victory, but the beginning of a new era, Katie announced to the assembled delegates. We have learned that freedom requires constant vigilance, and that no species can stand alone against tyranny. The galaxy is safer because we chose to fight together. The reconstruction of damaged worlds began immediately with human engineering teams working alongside alien specialists. Earth's industrial capacity was converted to peaceful purposes, as shipyards that had built war vessels now produced cargo haulers and colony ships. The kinetic weapons that had saved the galaxy were transformed into mining equipment and construction tools. Admiral Patricia White established the new military academy on Luna, where officers from every allied species would train together. The curriculum included human tactical doctrine alongside alien technology and cultural studies. Future generations would be prepared to defend the galaxy without repeating the mistakes that had allowed the Zephyrian Empire to grow so powerful. Dr. Emma Clark continued her research into biomechanical technology. but focused on medical applications rather than weapons. The knowledge gained from studying Zephyrian constructs led to breakthroughs in artificial organs and neural interface systems. What had been designed for destruction was transformed into tools for healing and enhancement. The Outer Rim colonies that had suffered during the war were rebuilt with better defenses and improved communication systems. Every human settlement now maintained hidden weapon stockpiles and trained militia forces. The galaxy would never again be caught unprepared for large-scale warfare. Captain Michelle Thompson was promoted to admiral and given command of the new patrol fleets that monitored the galaxy's borders. Her ships carried both human and alien crew members who worked together to maintain peace between the stars. The lessons learned during the Zephyrian War had created bonds between species that would last for generations. On Earth, President Alex Carter signed the Galactic Defense Treaty that formally committed humanity to protecting all free worlds from future threats. The document was witnessed by representatives from every allied species and established the legal framework for permanent military cooperation throughout the galaxy. The memorial to Captain Matt Wilson was built in orbit around Nexus Prime where the final battle had taken place. The monument honored not just the young pilot, but all the beings who had died fighting for galactic freedom. Visitors from across the known worlds came to remember the sacrifice that had saved civilization itself. 10 years after the war ended, Katie Morrison retired from military service and became Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. She had seen humanity evolve from newcomers to galactic protectors and knew that the future held even greater challenges. But she also knew that the species of the galaxy had learned to stand together against any threat. The Zephyrian Empire never returned from the dark space beyond the rim. Some believed they had been destroyed completely, while others thought they were rebuilding their forces for another invasion attempt. But the galaxy was ready for them now, with unified fleets and shared technology that made every world a fortress. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not their weapons or their tactics, but their unwavering determination to protect the innocent regardless of the cost. They had shown the galaxy that freedom was worth fighting for, and that no tyranny could stand against beings willing to sacrifice everything for what was right. The stars themselves seemed brighter, now that the shadow of the Zephyrian Empire had been lifted. Children of a dozen species played together on worlds that had been battlefields while their parents worked to build a future where war would never again threaten the peace of the galaxy. And in the deepest archives of Earth's military headquarters, plans were already being made for the next threat that might emerge from the unknown regions of space. Humanity had learned that eternal vigilance was the price of freedom, and they would never again allow evil to take root among the stars.